What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video. In this, we're going to be looking at imports and exports as far as consumer and producer surplus goes. We're going to talk about how import tariffs affect the consumer and producer surplus, how it creates revenue for the government, and how it creates a deadweight loss. Now, before we get into that, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, as it is the best way to support me and my desire to bring high quality, easy to consume tutorials to you at no cost. So let's check it out.
So suppose the market for wheat in the US can be described with the following equations. So you have quantity demanded, quantity supplied, and the world price of wheat is $200. That means that foreign producers are charging $200. That is the price that you would be exporting or importing wheat for. The first question is, how many units of wheat would be produced and sold by US producers? So the first thing here would be to plug $200 into supply to figure out this answer. So if I were to plug in a price of $200, I would get a quantity supplied of 25, which means that a price of 200, producers are willing to produce 25 units. If you plugged that same price into demand, so 200 minus 0.5 times 200, you would get a demand of 100, which means that a price of $200, consumers want to purchase 100 units of wheat. Suppliers are only willing to produce 25 units of wheat. The difference would be the imports. So the difference between supply and demand would be the amount of units of wheat imported. The consumer surplus and producer surplus, for this I would sketch the graph. So I've given myself some space over here. I'll draw my axes. Okay, so I've got quantity, price, and if I want to sketch the demand equation, I would simply plug in a quantity of 0 to see where I hit the y-axis. So if I set quantity as 0 and solve for price, that would give me a price of 400. So I'll just write that up here. I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be 400. And I know that it'll hit the other axis at 200, so we'll do 50, 100, 150, 200. Okay, we'll call it right there. So this would be your demand equation. For supply, I'll do the same idea. So negative 175 plus P, that's my supply equation. I'll set that equal to 0. So that would give me a price of 175. So if this was 100, this is 175 right there. Okay, great. Now I need a second point for supply. And I already know that when price is 200, quantity supplied is 25. We established that in the first part of the question. So I'll go to, so if this is 50, 25 would be right here. So I'll just draw a line. So right over here at the intersection of 200 and 25, I've got another point. So I'll just connect the dots, extend this all the way. So here's my supply equation, here's my demand equation. I'm also going to draw a horizontal line at 200 at the world price. So I know that it's going to hit demand at the value that we calculated earlier, which was 100. And I can actually see it lands perfectly on 100 because I'm using a grid, so my answers are apparent. Okay, consumer surplus is found by taking the area that is below demand, above price, and to the left of the quantity consumed, which would be 100. So this triangle here that I'm highlighting, that would be the area that corresponds to consumer surplus. For producer surplus, it is the area that is below price, and I'll need to zoom in here. Below price, above supply, and left of quantity supplied. So for the producers, it would actually only be this little triangle over here. Okay, so let's do the math. For consumer surplus, we got that big triangle. So the base is 100. The height is 200, right? That is the gap from 200 to 400. Divided by 2. So 100 times 200 is 20,000. 20,000 divided by 2 is 10,000. For producer surplus, the little triangle, base is 25, height is 25, right? The gap between 175 and 200 divided by 2. So 25 times 25 is 625, divided by 2 is 312 and 50. So the consumers are much, much better off here than the producers. In the following question, you're told that the government is going to impose a $20 import tariff. Now, what that looks like on your graph is we're going to add $20 to the world price. So I'm going to move my world price up $20. So I'll draw a new horizontal line roughly here. So that is the world price plus the tariff. So that would be $220 now. The first question is, what will be the number of units imported to the US? So we're going to repeat the process that we did before. So remember that imports are found by taking the quantity demanded minus the quantity supplied. So quantity demanded would be 200 minus 0.5 times the new price of 220. Quantity supplied would be negative 175 plus the new price of 220. So this would reduce the imports to 45 units, down from the 75 we had earlier. Next, you're asked again what the consumer surplus and what the producer surplus would be at this new price. So if we zoom in here, back to what we had before, what's going to change is that the consumers are going to lose this area, which I'll make purple. The consumers are going to lose this entire area right here because the price is moving up to 220. So if we follow the principle of below demand, above price, left of quantity, well, now you're limited to that triangle. The producers are going to gain part of it. So the producers are going to gain this first portion. Now I'm going to zoom in here and I'll just outline the new producer surplus, which would be this triangle. Again, the principle is below price, above supply, left of quantity. Great. So let's do the math on these. For the consumer surplus, actually, before we can do the math, we're going to need to find some of these points. Like I need to know what is the new quantity supplied and what is the new quantity demanded. We can actually solve that right here. So if we punch this in, 200 minus 0.5 times 220 is 90. That's quantity demanded. Negative 175 plus 220 is 45. So I know that it hits the supply at 45 and the demand at 90. Great. So for the consumer surplus, we have the triangle that has a base of 90 and a height of 180. So 90 times 180 divided by 2. So the consumer surplus drops to 8,100. For the producer surplus, we zoom in here. We've got this triangle with the black outline. So a base of 45 and a height of 45 from 175 to 220. So 45 times 45 divided by 2. Consumer surplus rises to $1,012.50. For question D, you're asked the government revenue. So in a tariff, the government revenue would simply be the imports multiplied by the tariff. So since we established that 45 units would be imported and the tariff is $20, the government would make $900 in revenue. To find the deadweight loss, which is the amount of overall benefit lost to the economy, we're going to need the change in the consumer surplus. We're going to combine that with the change in the producer surplus. The consumers now have a surplus of 8,100, but started off with a surplus of 10,000, which means they lost 1,900. So the economy lost 1,900 there. The producers now have a surplus of 1,012.50, but started off with a surplus of 312.50. So the producers gained 700. So on one hand, the economy lost 1,900, but then it also gained 700. We're going to also add to this the revenue earned by the government. So the government also earned $900. We end up with only negative $300. So the economy is only $300 worth off. The deadweight loss is $300. Graphically, if I go back here, this corresponds to these two little triangles, which I'll highlight in a bright pink. This right here. And right here. That will be the deadweight loss. The area between this area here, that is your government revenue.
All right, everyone, so that's it for this video. I hope that you found it to be useful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I'll see you at the next video.